Yes. Uh, a very good morning from India and good afternoon from Japan. So myself, Dr. Suman Chakraborty, Associate Professor of Department of Anthropology in Mrinalini Datta Mahavidyapit, a government-aided college located in Kolkata, very near to the Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose International Airport. And today is a very important day because after a long gap, we again are very fortunate to start our uh, lecture series with the lecture from Japan. So we are very tried to get the resource person. Now we are very honored to have with us that Professor Takami Kuayama from Japan, basically from Hokkaido University and northeastern part of the Japan, I think so. And now he is living in Tokyo. Now, this lecture series is a very important one in Asian perspectives. And this lecture series started started our planning during the COVID time. The first lectures happened on 11th August 2021 by Dr. Carlos P. Tartle. He is from Department of Anthropology from University of Philippines, and he described the whole understanding of what about the historical aspects of anthropology in Philippines perspectives. So after that, there are so much countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Hong Kong, China, then Sri Lanka, India, of course, Bhutan, Nepal, and these are the all 12 countries. They extend the resource person extend their valuable things, and including Indonesia, Professor Yunita help us a lot during our this kind of lecture series. It's basically open up our mind, specifically the students who are only concentrated their own anthropological knowledge from their own countries. So these things are very important for the future also, for exchanging the knowledge between the countries, specifically the Asian one, which has had time of colonial influences, and how much it can be altered the views of the people is very important for us. So from me, it is very important event. So at first, I'd like to request Dr. Ratna Tayang from Deranatung Government College, Itanagar, Arunachal Pradesh, to deliver the welcome address. Ratna.
Thank you so much, sir. And good morning to everyone here. I'm Dr. Ratna Tayang, the joint convener and the head of the Department of Anthropology, Deranatung Government College, Itanagar. I warmly welcome to all of you to the 13 lectures of the International Lecture Series on the historical development of anthropology as a discipline in Asia. This lecture series is jointly organized by the Department of Anthropology, Deranatung Government College, Arunachal Pradesh, and the Department of Anthropology, Mrinalini Datta Mahavidyapit, West Bengal, and the Department of Anthropology, University of Sri Lanka, Jayawardenepura, Sri Lanka. First of all, it is my great honor to welcome today's speaker, Professor Takami Kuayama, the Professor Emeritus, Hokkaido University, Japan. And sir, we are really thankful to you for accepting our invitation and giving your valuable time to share your knowledge with us. I also thanks all our respected guests, faculty members, participants, and dear students for joining us today and making this event special. We, as Suman sir rightly said, that we started this lecture series on the 11th of August 2021. Our first lecture was from the Philippines, second one from Malaysia, then the Indonesia, Hong Kong, China, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Republic of Korea, then Bangladesh, Nepal, and our 12th lecture was from India. So the main purpose of this lecture series is to create platform for discussion and exchange of ideas in anthropology across Asia. With this vote, I once again warmly welcome our today's speaker and all the participants. I'm sure today's sessions will be a great learning experience for everyone. Over to you, Suman sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ratna Tayang, for your wonderful welcome, the warm welcome to all the participants. Now, I'd like to request someone to disconnect the sharing because someone share his her screen. Can you disconnect it? Right? Okay, fine. Now, I'd like to request Dr. Mibiriba from Deranatung Government College to give a brief introductions of our resource persons today.
Yes. Good morning to everyone present here in this international lecture series. It's my privilege to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Professor Takami Kuwayama, one of the most respected anthropologists in Asia and beyond. Professor Kuwayama is Professor Emeritus of Hokkaido University, a position he has held since 2018, and he currently serves as Distinguished Visiting Professor in the Faculty of Literature at Notre Dame Cézanne University. Over the course of his remarkable career, he has taught at several leading institutions across Japan and the United States, including Hokkaido University, Soka University, Kwansei Gakuin University, and earlier at Virginia Commonwealth University in the Asia, in the USA. He completed his PhD in anthropology from University of California in 1989, one of the world's top centers for anthropological research. Professor Kuwayama's scholarly contributions are both deep and wide-ranging. His influential books, such as Native Anthropology, The Japanese Challenge to Western Academic Hegemony, and Native Anthropology and Folklore, Japan in the World System of Knowledge, have shaped global debates on center-periphery relations in anthropology and the positionality of Asian scholars. His upcoming book, Kimono, as seen around the world, continues his thoughtful engagement with culture, identity, and representation. He is also an active member of major professional bodies, including the American Anthropological Associations, the East Asian Anthropological Associations, and the Japan Anthropology Workshop. His decades of research, teaching, and critical scholarship, Professor Kuwayama stands as a leading voice in rethinking the development of anthropology in Asia. We are truly honored to have him join us today. Please join me in welcoming Professor Takami Kuwayama. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Riba. Now I welcome Professor Takami Kuyama. Now the platform is yours. Are you here, sir?
Oh, yes. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
So
sir.
I
Yes.
didn't expect such a large audience. So the sheer number of the participants intimidates me. Just a minute. I want to show you the slides which I have prepared. Can you see it? The title of today's lecture.
not yet coming. Not
Not
yet
yet.
coming. No, no.
How about this? Is it working? Can you see the title?
No, not yet. It's
Not
coming
yet.
actually. Yes, now it is visible.
Okay,
Now
good.
it is visible, right? You can start.
Okay, may I start?
Yes, yes.
Okay, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Chakrabarty and everyone else involved in making today's lecture possible. It's truly an honor to be invited to this lecture series on the historical development of anthropology in Asia. I understand that I have about 40 and hopefully 50 minutes for my presentation. I hope we'll have enough time to hold a question and answer session afterwards. So without further ado, I will begin with the first section, which is Japan's geographical location. Well, before we get into the details, I want to give you a general sense of Japan's location in East Asia. Japan consists of 4 major islands. The largest in the north is Hokkaido, and its central city is Sapporo, where I taught for 14 years. That's where Hokkaido University is located. And please remember the name Hokkaido, as it is home to the indigenous Ainu people. To the south of Hokkaido lies Japan's main island, which is centered on Tokyo today. And I'm speaking in Tokyo now. Heading west toward the geographical center of the main island, you will reach Kyoto, Japan's ancient capital, and Osaka, which is Japan's second largest city today. Heading further west, you'll reach Hiroshima, and Okinawa, Japan's southernmost island, is close to Taiwan. As you can see from this map, Japan borders 3 countries or regions: Korea, China, and Russia. Historically, Japan developed under China's influence. Ancient civilizations, including Buddhism, were introduced through Korea. Now let's move on to the second section, Japan's geopolitics in modern times. This is where the story gets a little complicated. East Asia was greatly impacted by Japan's imperialist colonialism in modern times. For example, in 1904, Japan and Russia went to war, and the world was greatly surprised when Japan emerged as the victor. It boosted the confidence of Asian peoples, but it also triggered the so-called yellow peril in Western countries. Soon after, in 1910, Japan colonized Korea and subsequently invaded China. This is why the colonial roots of anthropology apply to more than Western imperialism. If you zoom out and look at a larger map, you will see that Japan is a neighbor of the United States, separated by the Pacific Ocean. Japan's colonial interests, especially in China and Southeast Asia, clashed with the interests of the United States, which eventually led to the outbreak of the Pacific War in 1941. The war ended, as you know, in Japan's unconditional surrender in 1945 after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Before the war, among academics, European influence was strong, but since the end of the Pacific War, American influence has been much stronger in almost every aspect of life in Japan. So from this brief overview, I think it's clear that the history of Japanese anthropology cannot be explained from an Asian perspective alone. This is because Asia is usually associated with the colonized, dominated, observed, and then described. Japan's position has always been dual and ambiguous. It lies between the East and the West, and this duality is critical to understanding how anthropology, the study of the others, has developed in Japan. Um, Before the main topic, I want to briefly mention that it's very important to think about anthropologies in the plural. Like any other national anthropology, Japanese anthropology is just one of many that exist today. It's important to think of anthropology or any other discipline in the plural. Referring to anthropology as a singular discipline gives Anglo-American anthropology a hegemonic status, considering it a worldwide canon. In contrast, referring to anthropologies in the plural acknowledges the unique characteristics of each national anthropology. And this approach respects the diverse context in which they emerged and operates. Now I will turn to today's main topic. The origins of Japanese anthropology date back to 1884 when this person, Tsuboi, and his colleagues founded a small society called Friends of Anthropology. I will omit Japanese first names because Japanese names are probably unfamiliar to you. In my view, this movement was a reaction, partially a reaction against Western writings on Japan. For example, while Tsuboi was a student at the former Imperial University of Tokyo, an American biologist named Edward Morse was invited to teach there for a high salary. Morse discovered a mound of shells near Tokyo. He believed that they were the remains of a dwarf people who appeared in Ainu legends. Tsuboi agreed with Morse's assessment, but he disapproved of foreigners, non-Japanese, discussing Japan without consulting Japanese scholars. He wanted to bring the discourse on Japan back to the Japanese. And therefore, we can say that the beginnings of Japanese anthropology were influenced by the country's nationalism. And here the situation was similar in India too. During Tsuboi's time, there was significant public interest in the genealogical relationship between the Japanese people and the Ainu people. In the preceding Tokugawa period, which lasted for about 250 years, from 1603 to 1868, the Ainu people were exploited by Japanese politicians and merchants. During the subsequent Meiji period, when Japan began to modernize, the Ainu were subjected to severe discrimination and oppression because they were considered barbaric. The Ainu people, were forced to abandon their culture and language and adopt Japanese customs. The Japanese government implemented an assimilation policy, and this assimilation policy eventually led to a dramatic decrease in the Ainu population. Unfortunately, today no one speaks the Ainu language as their mother tongue. Scholars played a role in this tragedy as well. Around the turn of the 20th century, anthropometric research became popular in Japan and many parts of the world. It was common to measure and analyze Ainu skulls and bodies. Some scholars even plundered Ainu graves, stealing bones and burial goods. This photo, which is a little shocking, shows a professor at the medical school of my former university, Hokkaido University, displaying Ainu skulls in his office in the 1930s. As intermarriage between the Japanese people and the Ainu became common, the professor believed that he should examine Ainu skeletons before they were gone. He wanted to examine the skulls in their genuine form. So this belief is typical of the concept of disappearing people. The Ainu were also a favorite topic of study for cultural anthropologists as well, because they were Japan's internal others. It's only recently that serious reflections on these practices began. More on this later. Now, the early period of Japanese anthropology. In this section, I will discuss the post-Tsuboi development by focusing on just one figure, Lee. He was a contemporary of British anthropologist Alfred Haddon. Tsuboi conducted more extensive and long-term overseas fieldwork than Haddon and his team, who carried out the famous Cambridge Torres Strait expedition in the 1920s. Look at this map, please. It shows the locations where Tolei conducted his field research. First, in 1895, the year that Japan defeated Qing China in the Sino-Japanese War, Tolei conducted his first fieldwork in northeastern China, and this is said to be the first overseas fieldwork conducted by Japanese anthropologists. Then from 1896 to 1910, Tolei studied Taiwanese Aborigines and was the first Japanese anthropologist to use cameras during fieldwork. Taiwan was ceded to Japan after the Sino-Japanese War. Tolei, his research then brought him to southern China, where he studied ethnic minorities like the Miao. Following Japan's annexation of Korea in 1910, Tolei started researching there and continued until 1932. He spent the longest period of time in northeastern China and Inner Mongolia for a total of 40 years, from 1895 to 1935. Additionally, he explored Sakhalin, the one up here, and the Kuril Islands, which are now part of Russia, in order to study the Ainu people. Before moving on, I want to add a cautionary remark here. The terms Aborigine and Aboriginal are used in my lecture to refer to the indigenous people of Taiwan. This usage is intentional because these terms are used in Taiwan's constitution, so no pejorative meanings are involved. I'm following their own local usage. Here again, the situation is probably similar in India, as the terms like Adivasi show. Just a minute. This photo, this set of photos, the left one was taken in 1896, while Tolei was doing his field work among the Taiwanese Aborigines. Three Aboriginals looked on, wondering what Tori was doing. If you compare this photo with the cover of the landmark book, Writing Culture, which was published in 1986, you'll notice that Tori preceded them exactly by 90 years. So clearly, anthropology has not exclusively belonged to Europeans and Americans since the very beginning of the discipline. By the interwar period, I refer to the period between two world wars. From here on, early this year, I read some historical accounts of Japanese anthropology. I then noticed that the post-World War II mainstream of Japanese anthropology, which basically follows Anglo-American and French traditions, originally emerged in Japan's colonies, specifically Taiwan and Korea. I think this is very interesting because the mainstream and its derivatives, or the center and the periphery within Japanese anthropology, were reversed before and after the war. From here on, I will focus on three groups of Japanese anthropologists. First, those in Taiwan, then Korea, and finally mainland Japan. After the Sino-Japanese War, Taiwan was ceded to Japan, as I mentioned earlier. In 1928, Utsushikawa, who was a Harvard-trained anthropologist, founded the Department of Race and Ethnic Studies at the then Imperial University of Taipei. It was the first higher education institution in Taiwan, and today it is called known as the National University of Taiwan, which is very prestigious. The Department of Race and Ethnic Studies was essentially an ethnological one, or in modern terms, an anthropological one. And the photo you are now looking at shows the department's connection to Japanese colonialism. In the middle were standing two military officers or policemen. The person standing next to them in the front line, who's wearing kimono, Japan's traditional dress, is the founder, Utsushikawa. Behind him, with long hair and a white shirt, was his brilliant student, Mabuchi. Together and with their colleagues, they conducted intensive research among the Aborigines of Taiwan. And they published a comprehensive report in 1935 titled A Study of the Genealogy and Classification of Taiwanese Aborigines. And this was in Japanese. It was a very long, thick book containing about 560 pages. Now, in today's terminology, I think this report can be called an ethnohistory of the 9 Aboriginal tribes in Taiwan they investigated. As this photo shows, it contains family trees. The left one and the right one shows maps that show the Aborigines' migration histories. It is striking that even today, when the Aboriginal people study their own histories, including land ownership, they continue to consult this report. Some Taiwanese scholars argue that the ability to read Japanese is a great advantage when studying the Aborigines. Mabuchi, here, the founder student, also explored Indonesia during the war, and he became familiar with Dutch structuralism. This is because Indonesia had been under the colonial rule of the Netherlands, but during the war, it was briefly occupied by Japan. After the war, Mabuchi played a leading role in introducing French structuralism and British social anthropology to Japan. He had only a few English language publications, but one of them was exported back to France. For example, Mabuchi's article on Okinawan shamanism was cited by Claude Lévi-Strauss. Now, similar to Taiwan, a Japanese Imperial University was founded in 1924. It's the predecessor of today's Seoul National University, which is a very, very prestigious university. And Akiba, the anthropologist and sociologist named Akiba, was appointed a professor at the Institute of Religion and Sociology there. I'm sorry, I couldn't find his portrait. And what's interesting is that Akiba studied with Bronislaw Malinowski in London in the 1920s. Akiba adopted Malinowski's functionalist approach when analyzing Korean shamanism, which was commonly practiced among Korean women, by relating shamanism, to Korean family structure and the oppression of women in the patriarchal system. This study was innovative, as British functionalism, whether that of Malinowski or Radcliffe Byrne, was not well known in mainland Japan until after the war. Next, this person, Izumi, was a brilliant student of Akiba's. After the war, he became a professor at the renewed Tokyo University, which was the first university in Japan to introduce American cultural anthropology. Izumi was an expert field worker both at home and abroad. However, he had some difficulties with the Ainu people in Hokkaido, and thereafter he transitioned to Latin American studies. And this photo was taken when he was visited Colombia. Now, Izumi was supposed to be the first Director General of the National Museum of Ethnology, which opened in Osaka in 1977. Unfortunately, he passed away before its opening. I will come back to this point later again. Now, the impact of wartime research on today, the question here is this: how is Japanese anthropological research, as well as sociological research, regarded in its former colonies? In Taiwan, the situations in Taiwan and Korea are radically different. In Taiwan, Japanese research on the Aborigines is highly valued as a precious record of their past way of life. The 1935 genealogy book, which I mentioned earlier, is still being consulted today. In contrast, in Korea, where anti-Japanese feelings remain strong, Japanese research is often dismissed regardless of its scholarly value. Then what was happening in mainland Japan? In 1934, the Japanese Society of Ethnology was founded. It was a professional organization with about 300 members from various related disciplines. This society changed its name to the Japanese Society of Cultural Anthropology in 2004, exactly 21 years ago. In the following year, in 1935, the Japanese Journal of Ethnology, which was the first of the professional society's journal, was issued. It continues to this day, but changed its name to the Japanese Journal of Cultural Anthropology in the same year, 2004. It is a high quality journal, but its impact abroad is limited because all articles are written in Japanese. with only brief English summaries. Now, for today's lecture, I examined the journal's index from the inaugural year 1935 to around 1955, 10 years after the end of World War II. And so this is new. In Japan, at least, there has been much debate on the colonial roots of Japanese anthropology, but little has been said about the content of the journal itself. I identified three dominant research trends, though this is only a preliminary finding. Excuse me. First, from 1935 to 1940, when Japan expanded its overseas territory, many articles appeared on the areas under Japan's military or colonial control. Rule. These regions included not just Taiwan and Korea, but also some parts of China and Micronesia. The regions featured spanned a large portion of the globe, and in this sense, the journal was international in scope, which I think exemplifies the irony of colonialism. There are also many reviews of major technical books written in English, French, and German. And this continued until international transportation was disrupted by the outbreak of World War II. Interestingly, neither Malinowski's Argonauts of the Western Pacific and Radcliffe Brown's Andaman Islands were reviewed. Second, from 1941, when the Pacific War broke out, to around 1955, overseas research inevitably became difficult. And a growing number of articles about folk customs in rural Japanese communities emerged. Interestingly, many of these articles were written by folklorists. And third, throughout the period from 1935 to 1955, articles about the Ainu people were constantly being published. However, there were fewer publications about Okinawa than I had expected. Like the Ainu, Okinawans are also considered internal others by the mainland Japanese. It was only after the war that Okinawan studies became popular among anthropologists. It was the folklorists who took the initiative in Okinawan studies, and this brings us to the next section, which is the connection between anthropology and folklore studies. First, I would like to point out that Japanese anthropology used to be closely connected to folklore studies. And this was also the case in many other countries. For example, both British and American anthropologists once had close ties with folklore studies. Edward Tyler, often called the father of anthropology, served as vice president of the Folklore Society, which was established in London in 1878. In the United States, Franz Boas, the father of American anthropology, served as president of the American Folklore Society 3 times, in 1900, 1931, and 1934. The same can be said of Japan, but the situation was a little different. Japanese anthropology and folklore studies developed hand in hand because Japan's modernization occurred later than in the West. As a result, Japanese scholars discovered in their own countryside what Westerners had found in distant foreign lands. Additionally, Japanese folklorists were interested in studying kinship and village structure, which brought the discipline close to anthropology and sociology. In 1934, the year after the Japanese Society of Ethnology was founded, Yanagita, this person you see on the screen, who is said to be one of the intellectual giants of modern Japan, established the Popular Tradition Society. And this English term, popular tradition, is said to be an English translation of the French term tradition populaire. Now, one distinctive feature of the society, Popular Tradition Society, was that it included many amateur folklorists who were interested in studying their homeland. Yanagita firmly believed that Japan should be studied by the Japanese themselves. He even took delight in saying that Japan is the only non-Western country with a long history of insider research. But I know that the same claim was often made by some Indian scholars. Now, the next question is what happened after World War II? The focus here is on how anthropology developed in Japan without colonies. In the immediate post-war years, there was a notable shift toward a greater focus on domestic research. So this shift was inevitable because Japan was occupied by Allied forces led by the United States, which meant that Japan lost the freedom and resources necessary for overseas research. Domestic research was therefore a substitute, but it did provide deeper insights into and occasionally new analysis of Japanese folk customs. Folk's possession is one good example. People believe that mental illness was caused by being possessed by fox spirits. And this topic was not studied, at least intensively, by pre-war Japanese anthropologists. So under these circumstances, research into the Ainu people and the Okinawans as Japan's internal others flourished in the early post-war years. I want to mention here one important terminological problem which concerns ethnology. Ethnology was used to refer to the study of foreign cultures before the war, but it was replaced by cultural or social anthropology after the war, particularly in university courses. This change was partly due to the influence of the United States, but mainly because of the stigma, negative image attached to the discipline ethnology. During the war, research institutions with the term ethnology in their names were established in Japan and abroad. These institutions aimed to collect information on Asia for military purposes. Pre-war Japan arrogantly proclaimed the ideal Greater East Asia called prosperity sphere. And this ideal said that Asian people should prosper together under Japanese tutelage. Now, one major exception to the terminological change concerns museums. Ethnological museums are still called that because it's more understandable to the general public. This set of photos are about the National Museum of Ethnology, which I mentioned previously. It opened in 1977 on the site of 1970 World Fair, which was held in Osaka. It's recognized as one of the largest ethnological museums in the world. The right picture shows the museum's south Asian collection, I think. Beginning in the early 1960s, after Japan had recovered from the war, the situation dramatically changed again. This recovery was symbolized by two major events. The 1964 Olympics, which were the first to be held in Asia, and the 1970 World's Fair, which I just mentioned. In 1965, the Japanese government introduced a comprehensive grant system that made overseas research possible, even in faraway places like Africa and Latin America. So, without exaggeration, I think it's safe to say that there is almost no place in the world today that has not been investigated by Japanese anthropologists. Some major features of Japanese anthropology today, in my view, it's not clearly distinguished from its Western counterparts in terms of subject matter, theory, and methods. However, it's distinct in its own ways in the following four ways. First, Japanese anthropology is ethnographically oriented. The fieldwork conducted by Japanese anthropologists is generally more intensive and extensive as well than the fieldwork conducted by Western anthropologists. A classic example is Tori, who was mentioned at the beginning of today's lecture. However, the Japanese are rather indifferent to theory building, so its impact is limited to area specialists in the wider world. And the second feature is that most research findings and ethnographies are written in Japanese. This is possible because the Japanese Society of Cultural Anthropology publishes its own professional journal. Japanese scholars can also publish in their own universities' in-house journals. Also, the Japanese book market for general readers is quite large. However, this is a double-edged sword because their writings seldom reach an international global audience due to the language barrier. And third, Japanese anthropologists have written as much about their own culture as they have written about other cultures. Of course, their research focus is on other cultures rather than their own. But Japanese scholars often use the other as a mirror for the self and write popular books specifically about Japan. In contrast, as far as I know, few books have been published in Anglo-American anthropology that focus on the researcher's own culture. This Japanese reflexivity is best exemplified by this figure, Nakane, author of the famous book, Japanese Society, published in 1970. 3 years previously, she wrote about Gao and Kasi. Now, in this internationally acclaimed book, Nakane frequently refers to India as a lens through which to see Japan. She mentioned other countries as well, but India was one of her focuses. And the final feature of Japanese anthropology, in my view, is this. Different intellectual traditions from around the world coexist within Japanese anthropology. The mainstream follows Anglo-American and French traditions, but area specialists frequently incorporate local theories and concepts, terms in their analyses. So one way to describe this epistemic diversity is to compare Japanese anthropology to a department store, which displays and sells a variety of goods. It's not intended for those looking for a specialized goods, but it appeals to everybody. So we can say that the lack of distinctive features is Japanese anthropology's distinctive feature. Here I would like to mention 16 topics that are widely discussed among Japanese anthropologists. These topics come from part 2 of the popular textbook, Accessible Anthropology, which I edited. The third edition came out only this year. The 16 titles are media, including IoT, Internet of Things, visual images, landscape, cultural heritage, sustainable development goals, women's menstruation, disaster, Anthropocene, multi-species, ontological turn, community, business anthropology, and design anthropology, dress and fashion, dance and the body, people without nationalities, and multiculturalism. This is the last section of my presentation today. Formal apology to the Ainu people, 2024. I will conduct by pointing out an important development that occurred last year. The Japanese Society of Cultural Anthropology issued a formal statement of apology to the Ainu people for neglecting their human rights in past research. The statement declared, quote, anthropology would have no future without properly acknowledging and constantly reflecting on the mistakes made. I think the mistakes made by the Japanese, since anthropology is a discipline that deals with living people. Now, from the Ainu's perspective, this statement was made rather abruptly and lacked convincing explanations. They asked, why now? I'm not convinced either, since nothing serious happened between the Japanese and the Ainu during my 14 years in Hokkaido, which is Ainu's homeland. In my view, the decision to apologize was likely influenced by internal circumstances surrounding the Japanese Society of Cultural Anthropology. Here. Since the 1980s, there have been ongoing reflections or even self-criticisms of the ways anthropologists, both biological and cultural, treated the Ainu people. So the statement can be understood as the culmination of these reflections rather than as a genuine attempt to reconcile with the Ainu people. Politically speaking, the decision was also influenced by a new law implemented in 2019, 6 years ago, which recognized the Ainu people as Japan's indigenous people for the first time in history. And this law is called the Act Promoting Measures to Achieve a Society in which the pride of the Ainu people is respected, a rather long name. There are many more topics I should cover to provide a comprehensive overview of Japanese anthropology, but I will stop here for the sake of time. I will answer any questions during the question and answer session, and if possible, I would like to hear your thoughts on the differences and similarities between Japan and South Asia. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Takami Kuyama, for your wonderful, wonderful lecture and your final slides. That's the apology to Ainu people. Know that for since very long time, Japan voted in favor of UN declarations on human rights of indigenous people in 2007 and officially recognized that Ainu people as an indigenous people in 2008. So it is a matter of the executions. It is a matter of understanding that whether the Ainu people, they have been properly acknowledged by the other communities who are living in the Hokkaidos. So we've never been there, but Ainu people, I don't know. I inquired about the Ainu people from one human rights fellow from I think University of Lapland, Professor Kamrul Hossain. He was the research professor of the University of Lapland and frequently visited in the around in Hokkaido island. And he also said that that yes, now the Japanese people are respecting they build some museum also. I think so. The museum also
Yes.
the Ainu peoples. So it is very very positive response of the Japanese people and also the historical understandings. So now the floor is open for any questions who is want to understand more detail. Kindly put any questions. If you have any questions, then you can write to the message box, and also you can unmute yourselves and put the questions. No problem. Professor Takami is here, and it is our great pleasure to know the answer from his own word. Right? Is there any questions from the participants or any comments?
Comments are welcome.
Yeah. Is
Sir,
there any question? Yes,
yes.
yes, Ratna.
Sir, do
Yes.
you find any difference of anthropological tradition of India and Japan? Do you see any
Well,
difference in Indian anthropology and the anthropology of Japan?
well, I don't know much about Indian anthropology, but I did read a few articles about the history of Indian anthropology for this lecture. And rather than differences, I found a lot of similarities between the two countries. For example, academic nationalism was quite obvious in the early stages of both Indian and Japanese anthropologies. And also, Japan and India have minority groups. They tend to be objects of study, but from their point of view, research is often an unwelcomed guest. Yes.
One question I got from our message box, Jenny Boa. I don't know if she or he anyway. How does you actually, Professor Takami, perspectives on anthropology in Asia contribute to the field? What's your opinion? How anthropology can contribute to the Asia in terms of development? I think so.
Well, regarding the contributions of Asian anthropologists to the wider world, I think we have a lot to offer. Although our voice or voices often cannot be heard in the mainstream of European and American anthropology. Is that because we don't have much to say, or is it because of because of the imbalance of power in what I call the world system of anthropology? I think the answer is the latter. It's not because we don't have much to offer to the rest of the world, but rather because of the power imbalance between the center and the periphery to which Japan belongs, I think. Our voices tend to be muted. For example, Japanese anthropologists usually write in Japanese, but as long as we continue writing in Japanese, people in the rest of the world will not listen. So writing in Japanese or Japanese language publications are the same thing as being nothing published. That's the reality, and I think this applies to other Asian countries. So first of all, in order to overcome this problem, I think it's important for Asian scholars to gather at a meeting like this, know each other better than before, and then think about how we should contribute, how we can contribute our accumulated knowledge to the rest of the world. If you are interested in this issue, um, please excuse me for advertising myself, but please read my book titled Native Anthropology, which was provocatively subtitled "The Japanese Challenge to Western Academic Hegemony." Thank you.
Thank you. Another question came from Ainam Gratan in the chat box, that how did historical factors, particularly Japan imperial expansion, impact the development of anthropology in Japan and portrayal of Japan people in anthropological research?
I think the answer to the question is rather clear from today's lecture, but to repeat,
Yes.
there was and still is much negative impact of Japanese
Yes.
colonialism on today's situation. For example, although Taiwanese often appreciate Japanese colonialism because in very good ways it led to the publication of good ethnic histories of tribal groups. But look at Korea, for example. I have many good friends there, but generally speaking, there are very strong anti-Japanese emotions, which often lead to the immediate dismissal of Japanese writings during the war because they are negative legacies of Japan's colonialism. So unfortunately, Japanese imperialism and colonialism negatively continue to affect the development of Japanese anthropology in this part of the world. But I'm hoping that through this kind of meeting, we should appreciate each other's work as scholars, as friends, and eventually, collectively, we should think about how the best way to contribute to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Okay. So, sir, I have some questions, but I put one important inquiry about what is the future issues in Japan, where anthropology students, basically from other countries too, they can concentrate to study the society. Is there any important topic coming in future in Japanese perspectives?
I think I already mentioned some, or rather 16 of the recent topics that were commonly studied by younger generations of the Japanese, including such things like Anthropocene, disaster, even female menstruation, and so on. But as I see it, there is no one or two definitive ways Japanese anthropologists are going into. It's quite diverse. And what's bad, it's good in itself. But what's unfortunate is that from the outside, what's going on within Japan is usually invisible. So the rest of the world don't know what we're doing. And this is an institutional matter, but writings in the English language don't matter as much as in other Asian or African countries. What I heard about Israel, for example, is that publications in Hebrew are less appreciated than publications in English. And the same is true of Hong Kong, where English language publications are definitely necessary in order to be promoted to get a job. But it seems like Japan is in the opposite direction, in the opposite position. For example, very few Japanese anthropologists know that I'm giving a lecture.
No, actually, the thing is that the use of native language or subject learning also encourages. Also, now government of India, for our new education policies 2020, they also encourage to the native language teaching, because it helps to understand and to sustain the language for their future. So this is also important part. So another question is that I just wondering that in Indian anthropology, if anyone asks me who is the father of Indian anthropology, you can say that Sir S.C. Roy, right? Sharat Chandra Roy. Then in Indonesia, it is the Kunja Running Rath, whatever Professor Kunja running Rath, what Professor Unita said. So in Japan, any scientist you can tell the father of Japanese anthropology?
Well, the person I mentioned at the outset, Tsuboi, is widely considered to be the father of Japanese anthropology. But the situation among cultural anthropologists is a little complex because Tsuboi not only studied society and culture, but also the biological makeup of human beings. And he was also interested in archaeology. So the Biological Professional Society of Japanese Biological Anthropologists also consider him as father of anthropology. So here we have the ambiguity of the meanings or double meanings of anthropology, biological and social and cultural. Now, going back to the question of language, I think the development of artificial intelligence will greatly help us to overcome the language barrier. Recently, I have learned to use automatic translation machines as well as generative AIs such as ChatGPT. And I've got the impression that sooner or later, the language problem, which has prevented our scholarship from spreading to the rest of the world, will eventually be overcome, maybe much sooner than I expected. Maybe probably before I die.
Sir, my last question is in Japan, whether there is any exchanging of knowledge between the different sub-discipline of anthropology, like cultural anthropology, social anthropology, and also physical anthropology, or archaeological anthropology, or linguistic anthropology. Is there an environment created in Japan who can exchange? Because we know that there is a society of the Society of Physiological Anthropology, and the journal is also there. So I have published one paper also in Journal of Physiological Anthropology. But my question is whether you are trying to integrate the integrative approach in anthropology in Japan.
Well, my brief answer is that as far as I know, or as far as I see, we seem to be going in the opposite directions. Biological anthropology is going away and away from cultural anthropologists, and seen from this perspective, I think they will say the same. And this is because of the professionalization, the advancing professionalization of anthropology. And in one way or another, it's almost inevitable. But when it comes to Ainu studies, for example, the bone and skeleton question is very important for cultural anthropologists as well.
Sir, you are mute. You are mute. Yes.
Oh, I'm
yes.
sorry.
No. You can continue.
Did you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was saying is that biological and cultural anthropologists in Japan seem to be going in opposite ways, in different ways, due to the further professionalization of their disciplines. And as far as Ainu studies are concerned, I think this is unfortunate because without the assistance of biological anthropologists, we cannot study the skeleton issues anymore. So integration, I'm hoping that some sort of integration, even on the amateur level, will occur.
Thank you very much. So we are just past the 1 hour and 10 minutes. So that is the end, I think, because the recording we have to stop here. So before we stop, so may I request Dr. Suchishmita Sen Chaudhary to give the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I would like to, first of all, I would like to thank the Chief Advisor of the Organizing Committee, which is constituted by Professor Dr. Charmali Edi Nahalange, Department of Anthropology, University of Sri Jayavardhanapura, Sri Lanka. Our Vice Principal, Sir, Sri Shumit Mukhopadhyay from Mrinalini Datta Mahavidyapit, West Bengal, and Dr. M.Q. Khan, Principal of DMGC, Itanagar, Arunachal Pradesh, for their immense support for organizing such lecture programs online. My heartfelt gratitude and thanks goes to the speaker today, Professor Takami Kuwayame from Hokkaido University, Japan. Sir, your lecture was very interesting, and thank you for accepting our invitation and delivering such a wonderful lecture. I would like to thank my friend Dr. Shuman Chakraborty, Associate Professor from the Department of Anthropology, MDM, for being engaged in coordinating with the stalwarts of anthropology across India and other parts of the world, and for organizing such lectures online and creating a bridge between India and abroad. My sincere thanks goes to all the joint conveners of and members of the organizing committee from different regions of India and also Sri Lanka for their cooperation in such endeavors. Special thanks goes to Ratna Taing. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the participants who have joined online from various parts of India and abroad. Thank you for your for remaining attentive and interacting with the speaker. Thank you very much, everyone who has attended today's program. Hope to meet you soon again in such kind of platform. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.